The great hall of the Galactic Concul stretched across 3 kilometers of polished stone and floating platforms. Representatives from over 1,000 worlds sat in their designated sections, their bodies shaped by evolution on planets humans had never heard of. Some breathed methane, others existed as pure energy. Few had no physical form at all, projecting themselves as shimmering lights that pulsed with each thought they shared. Elder Zaveth had watched civilizations rise and fall for longer than most species had existed. His body was ancient, covered in gray scales that had once been vibrant green. His 4 eyes moved independently, scanning the assembly with the patience of someone who had seen everything the universe had to offer. Or so he had believed until today. The Cathari delegation stood at the center of the chamber. They were impressive creatures, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with muscular bodies covered in dark red scales. Their faces were predatory, filled with sharp teeth and eyes that held no warmth. Commander Vorath led them, his chest decorated with medals from 40 conquered worlds. "The Council will hear your petition," announced the speaker. A being made entirely of crystalline structures that chimed when it moved, Vorath stepped forward. With the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat, the Cathari Empire has identified a suitable world for expansion. A small planet called Earth, located in the outer arm of a minor galaxy. The species there has barely achieved interplanetary travel. They pose no threat to galactic security and will make excellent labor resources. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Conquering primitive worlds was not unusual, though many species found the practice distasteful. The Concul rarely intervened in such matters unless it threatened broader stability. Zarveth felt a cold sensation spread through his ancient bones. He had heard of Earth. He had studied the transmissions that leaked from that small blue world. Something about the humans unsettled him in ways he could not fully explain. "You have studied this species?" Zarveth asked, his voice carrying across the chamber, despite its softness. Vorath turned to face him, showing the respect due to an elder while clearly considering him irrelevant. "Extensively. Our scientists have monitored their communications for decades. They are violent, divided, and technologically primitive. They spend most of their energy fighting among themselves over resources, territory, and ideological differences. A unified force will crush them easily. Their violence concerns you not at all," the Cathari commander laughed, a harsh clicking sound that echoed off the walls. "Their violence is precisely why they are weak. A species at war with itself cannot stand against an external threat. They will be so busy fighting each other that they will barely notice us until it is too late." Zarveth exchanged a glance with Ambassador Mirith of the Velkari Collective. Her species had attempted contact with humanity 2 decades ago. The mission had been classified at the highest levels, and Mirith rarely spoke of it. But Zarveth had seen her reports. He knew what the Velkari had discovered. "Perhaps," Zarveth said carefully, "you should proceed with caution." Vorath's eyes narrowed with something between amusement and contempt. "Caution is for prey species, Elder, the Cathari hunters. We do not fear primitives who still measure their history in mere thousands of years," as the Council voted to allow the invasion. It was not their place to protect species that could not protect themselves. This was the way of the universe, had always been the way. The strong survived. The weak served or perished as the Cathari delegation departed to prepare their fleet. Marith approached Zarvath's platform. Her body was covered in soft blue tentacles that rippled with her emotions. Right now, they were pulled tight against her form in a gesture of deep concern. "You tried to warn him," she said quietly. "He would not have listened to more explicit warnings. His species respects only strength, and we have no strength to demonstrate against them. Should we have tried harder?" Zarveth was silent for a long moment. His 4 eyes focused on the space where Vorath had stood, as if seeing something that existed beyond the physical realm. "Do you remember your mission to Earth, Ambassador?" Mirith's tentacles coiled tighter. "I try not to." "What did you find there?" "Species unlike any we had encountered. Chaotic, contradictory, brilliant, and terrifying all at once. They welcomed us with open arms and pointed weapons at us simultaneously. They offered friendship while preparing for war. They trusted no one, not even each other, and yet they formed bonds of loyalty that defied rational explanation. And what did your scientists conclude? Mirith's form shimmered with remembered fear. They concluded that humanity should be left alone, not because they were harmless, but because they were too dangerous to provoke. Their violence is not a weakness, Elder. It is a survival mechanism refined over millennia of constant threat. They fight among themselves because they are always preparing for a greater enemy. They trust no one because they know betrayal is always possible when they are finally united against a common threat. She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Zarveth nodded slowly. The Cathari will learn this lesson. Only hope the price is not too high. The invasion fleet departed 3 cycles later. 47 warships, each capable of devastating a continent. 200,000 warriors, the finest soldiers the Cathari Empire had ever produced. Support vessels carrying enough supplies to sustain a campaign lasting a decade or more. Commander Vorath stood on the bridge of his flagship. Watching as his fleet entered hyperspace, he felt nothing but confidence. The humans would fall like all the others had fallen. Their primitive weapons would bounce harmlessly off Cathari shields. Their scattered militaries would crumble against unified assault. Within 3 standard rotations, Earth would belong to the Empire. He did not know that humans had detected his fleet months ago. He did not know that the world's governments, despite their differences, had already begun preparing. He did not know that deep beneath mountains and deserts, scientists were working on technologies that should have been impossible for such a young species. And he certainly did not know about the message that Admiral Kevin Marshall had already prepared. Waiting for the moment the invaders revealed themselves. A message that contained no plea for mercy, no offer of surrender, no acknowledgement of humanity's apparent weakness. Only a warning in the Concul chamber. Zarveth settled into his observation post. He would watch this invasion carefully, recording every detail for the historical archives. He had a feeling that whatever happened on Earth would reshape the galaxies. Understanding of power, of strength, and of what it truly meant to be dangerous. They chose to invade Earth, he murmured to himself. His 4 eyes fixed on the distant stars where the Cathari fleet was traveling. They will soon discover why that was a mistake. The universe was about to learn that size did not determine threat. Technology did not determine courage. Age did not determine wisdom. A young species on a small blue world was about to teach everyone a lesson that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The humans were waiting, and they were ready. The Cathari fleet emerged from hyperspace in the shadow of Earth's moon. Commander Vorath stood at the center of his bridge, surrounded by holographic displays showing every detail of the blue planet below. It was beautiful, he admitted to himself. A shame it would soon belong to the Empire, its beauty scarred by mining operations and labor camps. Begin scanning for military installations, he ordered. Lieutenant Kreth bent over her console, her clawed fingers dancing across the controls. The readings that appeared on her screen made her pause. She checked them twice, then a 3rd time, before reporting. Commander, I am detecting thousands of military bases across the planet. Thousands? Yes, sir. Concentrated on every continent. Multiple nations possess nuclear weapons, primitive fission and fusion devices, but numerous, very numerous. Roth waved his hand dismissively. Our shields can handle their primitive explosives. Proceed with the broadcast. The message was transmitted on every frequency the humans used. It interrupted television programs, radio stations, internet connections, and mobile devices across the entire planet. The words were simple and direct, translated into every major human language. People of Earth. This is Commander Vorath of the Cathari Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our territory. Surrender your governments, your militaries, and your resources immediately. Resistance will be met with complete destruction. You have 1 rotation cycle to comply. Vorath expected panic. He expected governments to collapse as populations demanded surrender. He expected human leaders to beg for terms, to offer anything in exchange for mercy. What he got was something entirely different. Within minutes of the broadcast, its communication. Officers reported incoming transmissions from every major nation on the planet. None of them contained offers of surrender. Instead, they contained variations of the same message, expressed in different languages, but carrying identical meaning. Go to hell, Lieutenant. Kreth watched her displays with growing confusion. Commander, The humans are mobilizing. Mobilizing for surrender? No, sir, for war. Aircraft are launching from carriers across their oceans. Ground forces are deploying to defensive positions. Civilian populations in many regions are arming themselves. Voroth stared at his displays, genuinely puzzled. They must not understand the situation. Perhaps our translation was unclear. The translation was accurate, Commander. They understand perfectly. They simply refuse to comply. Specific transmission cut through the chaos of signals. It came from a nation called the United States, and it appeared on the main view screen without authorization. A human male looked directly into the camera. He wore a uniform decorated with symbols of rank, and his face showed no fear at all. His name appeared in text below his image: Admiral Kevin Marshall, United States Navy. To the alien fleet in lunar orbit, Marshall said, "This is your only warning. Leave our solar system immediately, or we will consider your presence an act of war." He paused, and something changed in his expression. His eyes grew colder, harder, filled with a quiet intensity that made even Voroth feel uncomfortable. "I promise you this. We are very, very good at war." The transmission ended. Voroth stood in silence for several seconds before his pride reasserted itself. Arrogant primitives. They will learn respect. Order a demonstration strike. Target an uninhabited region. Show them what our weapons can do. The tactical officer selected coordinates in a desert region called Nevada. A single orbital strike beam lanced down from the flagship. It's powerful enough to vaporize everything within a 10-kilometer radius. It never reached the surface, Commander. Kreth's voice cracked with shock. The strike was intercepted. Intercepted. By what? Unknown. Some form of kinetic countermeasure. Ground-based. They shot down our orbital strike. Voroth felt something he had not experienced in decades. Uncertainty. The Ketheri had conquered 40 worlds, and not once had any species intercepted their orbital weapons. Such technology should have been decades beyond human capability. That should not be possible, he said. Dude! No, sir. It should not. Deep beneath a mountain in Colorado, a young woman named Lisa Parker removed her hands from the targeting controls. She was 26 years old, a specialist in aerospace defense systems. And she had just done something that the greatest minds in the galaxy had declared impossible. Her commanding officer, Colonel Danny Webb, stood behind her. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen combat on 3 continents. "Nice shot, Parker." "Thank you, sir." Her hands were shaking despite her efforts to control them. "But they're going to send more. A lot more, then we'll shoot those down too." "Sir, with respect, we can't win this conventionally. Their technology is too advanced. Even with the systems we've developed, they can overwhelm us with sheer numbers." Webb smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who knew secrets that would terrify most people. Who said anything about conventional? He led her down a corridor she had never seen before, through security doors that required multiple biometric scans to open. At the end was a massive underground facility filled with equipment that looked nothing like anything the military had ever publicly. Acknowledged scientists moved between workstations, their faces illuminated by holographic displays showing alien symbols and human translations. At the center of it all stood Dr. Catherine Hughes, a physicist in her 60s whose theories had been dismissed by mainstream science for most of her career. "Colonel Webb," Catherine said without looking up from her work, "I assume the party has started?" "They just tried to hit Nevada." Parker stopped it. "Good. That gives us time." Catherine finally turned to face them, and Lisa saw exhaustion and excitement fighting for control of her features. "The alien signal we detected 3 years ago gave us more than just warning. It gave us their communication protocols, their basic technological principles, and most importantly, their weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Lisa asked. "Their shields are designed to stop energy weapons and slow-moving projectiles. They never developed kinetic interceptors because no species they conquered ever thought to use them. Their targeting systems assume opponents will fight the same way they do." Catherine smiled. "Humans don't fight the way anyone expects us to fight. We cheat. We improvise. We do whatever it takes to win above them." in the silence of space, Commander Vorath was receiving reports that shattered his understanding of the universe. Human satellites were repositioning. Human submarines were launching missiles that actually threatened his outer perimeter ships. Human ground forces were organizing with a speed and coordination that should have been impossible for such a divided species. They were prepared, Lieutenant Kreth said quietly. They knew we were coming. Our approach was undetected. Unknown, Commander, but they have clearly been developing countermeasures for years. They were waiting for us. Vorath felt the first real fear of his military career. Not because the humans were dangerous, though they clearly were, but because everything he knew about primitive species, everything his empire had learned across 40 conquests, was proving to be wrong. The humans were not surrendering. They were not panicking. They were not begging for mercy. They were fighting back. And somehow, impossibly, they were holding their own. On the surface of Earth, Admiral Kevin Marshall received reports from commanders around the world. The initial strikes had been repelled. The aliens had been surprised. But this was only the beginning. Send word to all nations, Marshall ordered. Tell them to hold nothing back. Use every weapon, every tactic, every dirty trick our species has ever developed, and remind them of what we're fighting for. He looked out the window at the night sky, where alien warships hung like malevolent stars. Our children are watching. Let's show them what humanity does when someone threatens our home. The war for Earth had begun, and the galaxy was about to learn why you should never, ever underestimate a species that had spent its entire existence preparing for exactly this moment. The first wave of Kethari landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain. Commander Vorath had decided that orbital bombardment was too unpredictable given the humans' unexpected defensive capabilities. Ground invasion would be more reliable. His warriors were superior in every measurable way. They were stronger, faster, and equipped with technology generations ahead of anything humanity possessed. He expected the conquest to take days, hours, perhaps, once his forces established. Beachheads in major population centers. He was catastrophically wrong. The landing craft touched down in Central Park, New York City, at exactly 3:47 a.m. local time. 300 Cathari warriors emerged in perfect formation, their plasma rifles charged and ready. Personal energy shields shimmered around each soldier, capable of stopping any projectile humanity had ever developed. At least, any projectile the Cathari knew about. Sergeant Maria Santos had been awake for 36 hours. She was 32 years old, mother of 2 daughters who were currently sheltered in a basement in Queens with their grandmother. Maria had served 12 years in the United States Army, fighting in conflicts across 3 continents. She had seen friends die. She had killed enemies. She had done things that haunted her dreams, but she had never faced anything like this. Her National Guard unit was dug in behind hastily constructed barricades at the park's edge. 53 soldiers, most of them weekend warriors, who had never expected to face real combat. Behind them, the city stretched out in darkness, its millions of residents hiding in buildings and subway tunnels. "Sergeant," whispered Private Tommy Martinez, a 19-year-old kid from the Bronx. "They're huge." "Size doesn't matter if you can't hit what you're aiming at," Maria replied, her voice steady despite the fear crawling through her stomach. "Remember your training. Wait for my signal," the Cathari advanced with casual confidence. Their leader, a massive warrior with gold markings on his armor, spoke through a translation device. "Lay down your weapons, and you will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed." Maria raised her rifle. "The only thing getting destroyed tonight is your invasion force. This is our home. You're not welcome here." The Cathari laughed, the same clicking sound their commander made. They raised their weapons and began firing. The first volley of human bullets bounced harmlessly off the alien shields. Just as Maria expected, the Cathari laughed harder, advancing without fear. "Now," Maria said into her radio, "the second volley was different. Tungsten core armor-piercing rounds, developed in secret over 3 years specifically for this moment, tore through the alien shields like they did not exist." The first Cathari warrior fell with a look of absolute shock on his scaled face. Then the second fell. The third, the fourth, possible. The Cathari leaders screamed, diving for cover that did not exist. Their weapons cannot penetrate our shields. But they could. They did. And they kept doing it. The battle for Central Park lasted 6 hours. When dawn broke over New York City, 212 Cathari lay dead among the trees and pathways. Maria had lost 47 of her soldiers, including Private Martinez, who had thrown himself on a plasma grenade to save his squad. Maria knelt beside each fallen human, memorizing their faces, whispering their names. She promised them silently that their sacrifice would not be forgotten, that their deaths would mean something. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In Tokyo, elderly veterans who had sworn never to fight again emerged from their homes with hunting rifles, modified to fire alien-penetrating ammunition. In London, a teenage hacker named Samuel Cross led a team that infiltrated the Cathari communication network, spreading false orders and tactical confusion. In Moscow, submarine commanders launched the first successful orbital counterattack. Modified missiles that actually reached enemy ships and did damage. Humanity was fighting back with everything it had. And humanity had a lot more than anyone expected. In the Concul chamber, Elder Zarveth watched the battle through long-range sensors. His 4 eyes moved constantly, tracking hundreds of individual engagements across the planet's surface. Beside him, Ambassador Mirith stood in horrified silence, her tentacles limp with shock. "How are they doing this?" she finally asked. "They are primitives. They should have been crushed within hours." Zarvath's voice was heavy with something that might have been respect or perhaps fear, because they have been preparing for this moment for their entire existence. Every war they have ever fought against each other was practice. Every weapon they developed was a prototype for something greater. Every tactical innovation was a dress rehearsal for the real performance. But they could not have known an invasion was coming. They did not need to know. Humans do not prepare because they expect attack. They prepare because they refuse to be caught unprepared. It is their nature. Their paranoia is not a weakness, Ambassador. It is a survival mechanism refined over 10,000 years of constant conflict. On the view screen, a human news broadcast was playing. A reporter named Amy Martinez stood in the rubble of downtown Chicago, her face smeared with dust and blood, her clothing torn. But her voice was steady, almost defiant, as she spoke into the camera. "To our allies around the world, stand firm. To our enemies in orbit, you made a terrible mistake. This is our home. We will fight for every inch of it. We will bleed for it. We will die for it. And in the end, we will win." She paused, looking directly into the lens with eyes that burned with determination. Because that is what humanity does. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. And we never, ever forgive those who threaten our children. In homes across the planet, humans watched. Parents held their children close. Old people remembered wars they had survived. Young people realized for the first time what their species was truly capable of, and they picked up their weapons. They stepped out of their shelters. They joined the fight. Commander Vorith received casualty reports that made his scales turn pale. 40,000 warriors dead in the first wave. Another 30,000 wounded. Ground forces that should have swept across the planet were pinned down in 100 different locations, facing resistance that grew stronger by the hour. "This is impossible," he said, to no one in particular. "They are primitives." Lieutenant Kreth did not respond. She was too busy trying to coordinate a retreat that was rapidly becoming a disaster in Colorado. Lisa Parker worked without sleep, analyzing captured Cathari equipment and feeding information to resistance forces worldwide. Dr. Catherine Hughes had expanded her team, bringing in scientists from every nation willing to share knowledge. "Their shields have a frequency vulnerability," Catherine announced after 40 hours of continuous analysis. "If we can tune our weapons to match it, we can bypass their defenses entirely." "How long to implement?" Colonel Webb asked. "A week for prototype?" "A month for mass production. You have 3 days." Catherine laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "Then I guess we won't be sleeping." Above the planet, the Cathari fleet was bleeding. Below, Their ground forces were dying. And somewhere in between, humanity was discovering something important about itself. They had always known they were capable of violence. They had always known they were capable of destruction. But now, they were learning something else. They were capable of winning, Maria. Santos stood in Central Park as the sun rose over a city that should have fallen. Around her, survivors tended to the wounded and collected the dead. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of battle continuing in other parts of the city. She was exhausted. She was grieving. She was terrified of what came next. But she was also something else. Something that surprised her. She was proud. Proud of her soldiers who had stood their ground. Proud of her species that refused to surrender. Proud of a world that had looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. "We're not done yet," she said to the survivors gathered around her. "Not by a long shot. But we've shown them something today. We've shown them that Earth doesn't go down easy." She raised her rifle. And 53 voices that had been reduced to 6 raised theirs in response. "For Earth," they said together. "For humanity." And the war continued. 6 months had passed since the invasion began. And Commander Vorath was dead. His flagship had been destroyed by a weapon that should not have existed. A human-designed electromagnetic pulse device. Somehow modified to penetrate Cathari shielding and disable every system simultaneously. Vorath had been alive when his ship began falling toward Earth. He had watched through failing view screens as the atmosphere turned his vessel into a burning meteor. He had not been alive when it struck the Pacific Ocean. The new commander, Admiral Sheth, was a different kind of leader. Where Vorath had been aggressive and overconfident, Sheth was cautious and calculating. She had studied the humans extensively since taking command, and what she learned terrified her more than any enemy she had ever faced. She pulled the remaining fleet back to lunar orbit and requested reinforcements from the Cathari Empire. But reinforcements would take months to arrive, and in that time, something unprecedented was happening on Earth. Humanity was advancing technologically at a rate that defied every model the Cathari had ever. Developed. Dr. Catherine Hughes had not slept more than 4 hours in any given day since the invasion began. Her hair had gone completely gray. Her hands trembled constantly. But her mind remained sharp, and her work was changing the course of the war. "The aliens designed these weapons for efficiency," she explained during a briefing with military leaders from 12 nations. "Maximum effect with minimum energy expenditure. Very practical. Very logical." She held up a device that looked similar to a Cathari plasma rifle, but had been extensively modified. "We redesigned them for maximum damage. Their weapons were meant to subdue populations. Ours are meant to kill enemies. The difference might seem small, but in combat, it matters." Colonel Danny Webb examined the weapon with professional appreciation. How much more powerful? Approximately 300% increase in destructive capability. At the cost of higher energy consumption, but that is a trade-off we are willing to make. Similar breakthroughs were happening in every field. Human engineers had reverse-engineered Cathari propulsion systems and improved upon them. Human computer scientists had cracked alien encryption and developed countermeasures. Human biologists had analyzed captured enemy soldiers and found weaknesses in their physiology that could be exploited. The first human-built starfighter launched from a secret base in Nevada on the 203rd day of the war. Test pilot Captain Lucas Grant was 34 years old and had dreamed of flying among the stars since childhood. As he broke through the atmosphere and saw the curve of Earth below him, he felt tears streaming down his face. "Houston, this is Eagle One," he transmitted, his voice cracking with emotion. "I am in space. Repeat. I am in space, and I am armed." He was not alone for long. Within a month, a squadron of 12 human fighters patrolled Earth's orbit. Within 2 months, they numbered 50. Each one was flown by a pilot who had volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. None of them cared. They were protecting their home. Admiral Sheth watched the human fleet grow with mounting horror. Her intelligence officers provided daily reports, each more alarming than the last. "They are building a warship," one report stated. Construction began 47 days ago. At their current pace, it will be operational within 6 months. The Devastator, as humanity called it, was being assembled in orbit. Pieces launched from facilities around the world. Guided by engineers who had learned more about spacecraft construction in 6 months than the Cathari had developed over centuries. They learned too quickly, Sheth said to her advisors during a strategy session. This species should not be capable of such rapid advancement. Her chief scientist, an elderly Cathari named Vorik, who had survived the destruction of 2 ships, shook his head slowly. Commander, I have studied their history extensively since our arrival. They went from wooden sailing ships to orbital stations in less than 500 of their years. From chemical rockets to practical spaceflight in 6 of their decades. This is not unusual for them. This is normal. How is that possible? Because they compete. Constantly. Relentlessly. Every nation pushes against every other nation. Every scientist races against every other scientist. Every company fights against every other company. They have no central authority, no unifying leadership to coordinate their development. And somehow, this chaos drives them forward faster than any planned progress could achieve. Everett paused. His old eyes meeting Sheth's with something that looked like respect mixed with fear. We made a critical error, Commander. We saw their division as weakness. But their division is their engine. It forces them to innovate or die. It has made them the most adaptable species I have ever encountered in my long career. On Earth, Lisa Parker had been promoted 3 times since the invasion began. She now commanded a defense battery that protected the eastern coast of the United States, but her real work was elsewhere. In her limited free time, she worked with a team developing the next generation of planetary defense systems. Her partner in this effort was an unlikely ally, a captured Cathari scientist named Tereth, who had defected after witnessing something that changed his understanding of humanity forever. It had happened during a battle in what remained of Chicago. Tereth had been wounded, his legs shattered by falling debris. He had expected the humans to kill him. His species would have done the same to a wounded enemy instead. A human medic named Johnny Rodriguez had crawled through enemy fire to reach him. Johnny was 28 years old, from a small town in Texas, and had joined the army because he wanted to help people. Hold still, Johnny had said, applying field dressings to Tereth's wounds while plasma fires screamed overhead. This is going to hurt, but you'll live. Why? Tereth had asked, genuine confusion in his voice. I am your enemy. Johnny had looked at him with an expression Tereth had never seen on a human face before. It was not hatred or fear or anger. It was something else entirely. You're hurt, Johnny said simply. I'm a medic. That's what we do. That moment had shattered everything Tereth believed about humanity. These were not the primitive savages his people had expected. They were something far more complex, far more dangerous, far more worthy of respect. Now Tereth worked alongside Lisa, sharing Cathari's secrets, helping humanity understand their enemy. He had become, against all probability, a friend. Your people have one great weakness, Tereth told Lisa one night as they reviewed technical specifications together. What's that? You are mortal. Your lives are so brief compared to ours. A Cathari can live for 300 of your years. You have perhaps 80, 90 if you are fortunate. Lisa nodded. And that's a weakness? We believed so. We thought your short lives would make you cautious, conservative, unwilling to take risks or make sacrifices, but Tereth's scales rippled in the gesture his people used to indicate irony. But instead, your mortality makes you desperate. You know you have limited time, so you waste none of it. You see death approaching, and you run toward it screaming, demanding to accomplish everything possible before it arrives. It is the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. Lisa laughed, surprising herself with the genuine humor she felt. Yeah, I suppose it would look that way from the outside. It looks that way from the inside too, I suspect. Above them, the Devastator neared completion. Its hull gleamed in the sunlight, a monument to human determination and ingenuity. Weapon systems were being installed. Engines were being tested. Crew members were being trained, and across the solar system, Cathari reinforcements were finally approaching. 200 warships, nearly 5 times the original invasion fleet. Enough firepower to devastate 100 worlds. Admiral Sheth felt something approaching hope for the first time in months. Surely this would be enough. Surely even humanity could not stand against such overwhelming force. But deep in her chest, in the place where Cathari kept their darkest fears, she was not so certain. The humans had surprised her at every turn. They had done the impossible again and again. They had turned a desperate defense into a genuine war. What would they do next? She was about to find out. The real war was about to begin. The Battle of Earth's moon lasted 72 hours. It was the largest space engagement in galactic history. It changed everything. Cathari reinforcements had arrived exactly as promised. 200 warships, each one bristling with weapons capable of destroying cities. Nearly 5 times the original invasion fleet, crewed by warriors eager to avenge their fallen comrades and restore their empire's honor. Admiral Drith watched them emerge from hyperspace with something approaching relief. Surely this would be enough. Surely the humans could not stand against such overwhelming force? But humanity had not been idle during the months of waiting. The Devastator led the human fleet, out from Earth's orbit. It was massive by human standards, though still smaller than the largest Cathari vessels. Behind it came 300 smaller ships, fighters and frigates and destroyers, all built in secret facilities across the globe. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. They were fighting far from the safety of their planetary defenses. None of that mattered. Admiral Kevin Marshall stood on the Devastator's bridge, the same man who had issued the first warning to the invaders nearly a year ago. His hair had gone completely gray during the conflict. His face was lined with exhaustion and grief. He had lost friends, colleagues, and countless soldiers under his command, but his eyes still burned with the same cold determination that had marked his first transmission. Beside him stood Captain Maria Santos, promoted from the streets of New York to the stars above. She had survived a dozen battles since Central Park. She had lost count of how many enemies she had killed, how many friends she had buried. All ships. This is Marshall. His voice carried across every human vessel, transmitted on frequencies the Cathari could not intercept. You know what's at stake. Our families are down there. Our future is down there. Everything we are and everything we might become depends on what happens in the next 3 days. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, young and old, men and women, scientists and soldiers, people from every nation that had ever existed on that blue marble visible through the view screen. No retreat, no surrender. We hold the line here, or we lose everything. He straightened, and his voice grew stronger. Let's show these invaders what happens when you threaten humanity's home. The battle began with the Cathari confident of victory. It ended with them running for their lives. Human ships fought with a ferocity that defied tactical logic. When their weapons failed, they rammed enemy vessels. When their shields collapsed, they kept fighting anyway. When their ships were crippled beyond repair, their crews found ways to make their deaths count. Captain Lucas Grant, the first human to fly combat missions in space, led a squadron of fighters against a Cathari dreadnought 10 times their size. His weapons were depleted after the first hour. His wingmen were dead after the second. He used his ship as a missile, accelerating to maximum speed and aiming directly at the dreadnought's bridge. At the last second, he ejected, floating in the void as his vessel tore through the enemy's hull and detonated the ammunition stores within. The dreadnought exploded in a ball of fire visible from Earth's surface. Maria Santos herself commandeered a shuttle to pull Lucas from the wreckage. He was barely conscious, his suit damaged, his air supply nearly depleted. "You're insane," she told him as medics worked to stabilize his condition. He managed a weak smile through cracked lips. "I'm human." Same thing. In the Concul chamber, Elder Zarveth watched the battle with something he had not felt in millennia. Awe, pure, unfiltered awe, The Cathari were losing. Not slowly, not gracefully, but catastrophically. Their fleet, the pride of an interstellar empire, was being torn apart by a species that had achieved spaceflight within living memory. How? Ambassador Mirith whispered, her tentacles coiled so tightly they had changed color. How is this possible? Zarvoth's voice was quiet when he replied, because we forgot the most important lesson of the universe. Size does not determine threat. Technology does not determine courage, and age does not determine wisdom. He turned to face the assembled Concul, beings from 1,000 worlds who had gathered to watch what they expected would be humanity's final defeat. We have watched humanity for decades. We have studied them, analyzed them, and ultimately dismissed them. We were wrong. This species, with their short lives and violent history and chaotic civilization, has just defeated one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. He gestured at the view screen, where the last Cathari warships were fleeing into hyperspace. And they did it not despite their nature, but because of it. Admiral Marshall's voice crackled across all frequencies. A message to anyone who might be listening. To the Galactic Concul, to the Cathari Empire, and to anyone else who might be watching. Earth is not a prize to be claimed. It is not a resource to be exploited. It is our home, and we will defend it against any threat. From any quarter, for as long as we exist. He paused. And when he continued, his voice carried the weight of everything humanity had endured. But we are not your enemies. We have no desire for conquest. We want only to live, to grow, to explore the stars in peace. If you come to us as friends, you will find no species more loyal, more curious, or more willing to stand beside you. His voice hardened. But if you come as conquerors, ask the Cathari what happens when you choose to invade Earth. In the aftermath of the battle, humanity looked to the stars with new eyes. They were no longer alone. They were no longer helpless, and they were no longer willing to wait for the universe to come to them. Lisa Parker stood on the observation deck of the Devastator, looking down at Earth. The planet was scarred from the invasion. Cities had been damaged. Millions had died. Recovery would take decades, but they had survived. They had won. Beside her, Tereth gazed at the same view. He had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a Cathari who fought alongside humans, who considered them not enemies but friends. What happens now? He asked. Lisa smiled. Now we build. We explore. We reach out to every species willing to talk to us. And those who are not willing? Her smile faded, replaced by something harder. We hope they're smart enough to leave us alone. Because the next time someone threatens our home, we won't just defend ourselves. She turned to face him, and in her eyes he saw the fire that had burned in every human who had ever faced extinction and refused to accept it. Next time, we'll make sure it never happens again. It's far away in the Concul chamber. Elder Zarveth made a decision that would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. He rose from his seat and addressed the assembly in a voice that commanded absolute attention. I move that humanity be granted immediate admission to the Galactic Concul. With full rights and privileges of membership, the chamber erupted. Protests from dozens of species who had dismissed humanity as primitives, objections from those who feared what this violent young species might become, concerns about setting a precedent that would encourage other young civilizations. Zarveth waited for silence and spoke again. They have proven themselves. They have earned their place among us. And more importantly, he paused, his four eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. I would rather have them as allies than as enemies. I suspect most of you feel the same, whether you admit it or not. The vote was unanimous. 3 years after the invasion began, humanity took its seat among the stars. They came not as conquerors or servants, but as equals. They brought their chaos, their creativity, their impossible determination. Johnny Rodriguez, the medic who had saved Tereth, became one of the first human ambassadors to an alien world. Maria Santos retired from military service and dedicated her life to training the next generation of defenders. Lucas Grant continued flying until his body could no longer handle the strain, then became the most demanding instructor the Fleet Academy had ever known, and on Earth. Children grew up knowing that the universe was vast and dangerous, but also knowing something else. Something their parents had proven in fire and blood and sacrifice: humanity could handle it, because that was what humanity did. They survived. They adapted. They overcame, and the galaxy was never quite the same. Admiral Kevin Marshall gave one final interview before his death, decades after the invasion. The reporter asked him what he wanted history to remember about the war. Marshall thought for a long moment before answering. "I want them to remember that we were afraid. Every single one of us was terrified. We faced an enemy that should have crushed us easily, but we fought anyway. Not because we were brave, but because we had no other choice." He looked at the stars visible through his window, stars that now held human ships and human colonies and human dreams. "And I want them to remember this: never underestimate a species that refuses to surrender. Because the most dangerous thing in the universe is not the strongest army or the most advanced technology. It's a people with nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for." He smiled, old and tired and satisfied. We showed them that. We showed everyone that. And I think they'll remember it for a very long time. It